Hey there. Let's get started. I'm Bob Harris. I work for Cambia Health Solutions. And a little bit about me as we get started here. So I've spent the majority of my career in healthcare. I've worked in a variety of healthcare spaces, inpatient hospital, health insurance. My current role allows me to play both in the regulated health insurance businesses as well as our health and product services adjacent to the healthcare space. Currently, my role is I lead our competitive intelligence, I lead our proprietary research, both quantitative and qualitative, and I run our digital analytics group. I'm a native Oregonian. I work out of our Portland offices, and as evidenced last night by our conversations with some of my colleagues, it is pronounced Oregon, not Oregon. So if you don't want to stand out, it's Oregon. And yes, we have rainy winters, springs, falls, but the output of that is we have really great wine and beer, so come and join us. I have a wife and two daughters, two college-age daughters. That's right, I'm an empty nester. And the surprising thing about being an empty nester to my wife and I is that while my kids are eating ramen while they're in college, we're eating ramen while they're in college because I've got two kids in college. Last but not least, lifelong endurance athlete. That's really code for I'm an aging runner and I'm trying to preserve my knees just as long as possible. So I ride my bike and I swim as well. And this has led me to undertake attempting my first Ironman triathlon this year. So a little bit about my organization, Cambia Health Solutions. We're located in the Pacific Northwest. Our headquarters are in Portland, Oregon. We have almost 5,000 employees spread across 30 different states. We are one of the healthiest workplaces in the nation, and we have over 20 brands, and that continues to grow. And our solutions touch 70 million people nationwide. But we weren't always that way. Cambia Health Solutions was founded on an innovative idea back in 1917 when timber workers in the woods of Tacoma, Washington decided to pool their resources together to pay for times of unplanned sickness and injury in their community. This was forming the first blue plan in the nation. And the intent in that community was that the individual would be cared for by the community, making the cost of care more affordable to all. In 2003, we codified this original intent by creating our company's cause. And this is the cause of our organization: to serve as a catalyst to transform healthcare, creating a person-focused and economically sustainable system. I'm going to unpack that quickly. As a catalyst, we recognize that we are part of the healthcare system and that it is our responsibility not to completely transform because we can't do it alone, but to inject those innovative ideas into the system so that we can move our system forward. And it can't just be for the benefit of the system. It has to be focused on the consumer. And that's where the person-focused component comes in. And lastly, as you all experience, healthcare costs continue to go up. And so we need it to be an economically sustainable system that benefits all. Defining this cause was the first step toward accelerating innovation and a move to our health solutions company that we are today. This is a sea of brands. We started here at Pierce County Medical, 1917, just over a century ago, to serve the needs of people. And while the complexity of healthcare has grown, that spirit of innovation has not. From the roots of our company as regional health plans in 2003, we recognized that meeting consumers' needs truly went beyond just providing access to medical care and helping people with protection against catastrophic medical expenses. We determined that the best way for Cambia to fulfill its cause was through continued commitment to innovation, both in our health plan space and through startups and investments within the space as well. Since 2003, that journey has led us to spin off some of our original capabilities, like our RX, our life businesses, and our healthcare transparency businesses. Additionally, we've made strategic investments in companies that are developing capabilities that we view as important to our abilities to meet consumer needs, like Impulse, a secure messaging platform, or where capabilities within the market didn't exist, we stood our own up. And this is like our MedSavvy brand. It's a medication grading and transparency tool. Some of the brands that you see up here are thriving today. Other brands no longer exist. And still other brands have parted ways with our company. But that's the nature of the journey of innovation that we started over 100 years ago in the name of serving our consumers better, and it continues to drive us forward today. Here's the silo metaphor. My organization, too, is a product of its evolution with its systems and data that can trace their roots back to the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s. Most of these silos are self-created, as Jay was talking about earlier, but we also have some silos that exist due to the regulations that impact our businesses. And I'm sure for the majority of you, my peers, you too work in environments of data silos. For my analysts to get the most holistic view of our consumers, they first need to be good programmers that are indoctrinated into our tribal knowledge of data. And they need to know how to hook our data silos together. And they also need to know which silos stand alone that we can't get data out of. And there is a reasonable and an unreasonable amount of time spent to get this data. And there's value as an analyst of understanding where that data comes from and what format it originates in. But when you spend upwards of half of your time working to get the data and stitch the data together, you've lost valuable time for what you were hired for. And that's being an analyst and providing that holistic view of the consumer. On top of these solutions, we've had to implement a variety of solutions to meet our business needs through our evolution. Our legacy business was the health insurance businesses, and we had web trends there. And it met our needs in the HIPAA regulated side of our business. I'll get more into what HIPAA is later on. Other businesses broke off along the way, and as startups, they went to the solution that was going to meet their needs, the low-cost version, because they didn't have a lot of cash, but it met their needs in the moment. And it's kind of like they left the nest, kind of like teenagers leaving the house, flipping the old man off the whole way they went. And some of these spin-ups, and we had other spin-ups that came along, and they too went with the Google Analytics tool. And then some of them grew to a size where they needed more robust capabilities, and so they had to find yet a different solution. And I see heads nodding out there, yeah. And then more startups, Google Analytics. And then we had some people who were like, oh, that doesn't work. I'm going to try something else, and found the likes of Piwik. So we had all of these different solutions in place, but it didn't allow us to really view our consumer holistically. In 2016, 2017, we underwent a catalyst for change. And there were really three factors that drove us there. First, web trends. Web trends sold off their most advanced offering to another company. And it kind of left us standing there going, ooh, what's our future? HIPAA regulations changed in 2016, causing us to look at what were those data elements that we were sending out, and did we have to change to remain compliant within the law? And most significantly, our evolution of Cambia as a health solutions company really started to focus on driving experience at the consumer needs level. So, for the Constellation of Solutions worked for us up to a point. The point where we needed to start collecting our users' experience together as they journeyed across our different brands. For those of you who have multiple brands that interrelate, you may have had the experience of trying to tie these journeys together. oftentimes without a single unifying thread. What resulted for us was complicated data manipulations, big data pulls, countless hours of analyst time spent trying to identify who was who as they moved across our properties, and was that really the source of truth? By the time those projects were done, we really weren't much further along than we had been when we'd started, because so much time had elapsed since then. So in 2017, our leadership provided us with the directive to understand our consumer in their digital engagement and experience as a consumer moves across our family of brands. In order to meet this goal, we had to control the flow of data from our web and mobile sites to our desired endpoints, and if we had to be able to hook that data together so that we could get the most holistic view. We had to do this by controlling which tags we used, which we turned off, which were existent on our sites and we're just kind of dragging them down because they weren't interacting with them. The desired end state was to move from this logo soup to this, one Cambia. And this is where the music comes in, where consumer journeys are readily stitched together across properties, allowing us to understand use patterns and needs of consumer segments in different ways. We needed to be able to differentiate between consumers who were interacting with us across multiple brands and those who were only coming to a single site. This challenge really isn't all that insurmountable with today's analytics tools, but I work in an industry that provides a bonus challenge for us. It's called HIPAA. So, within the context of moving to experiences that meet consumer needs across the tools that Cambia provides, we encounter forces that are not aligned. Our headlines today are replete with stories of data breaches and misuse of data. Think Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, Target, and a list that goes on and on and on. Consumers demand from us who collect and use the data that they willingly provide to us or unknowingly provide to us, that we be good stewards of that data and that we protect that data. And this applies to everyone in the room, not just within the regulated health space. We all want our personal data protected. And with healthcare, there's nothing more personal than health, and therefore the data that goes along with it. This is where HIPAA regulations work to provide protections for the consumer and also penalties. And those penalties can be both financial and criminal for those who violate the regulations. So this is a big deal. On the other side of the equation is consumer need for greater personalization. In my role as a researcher, time and time again we hear from consumers. They don't want to be just another name to us or another number. They've been our customer for years, maybe decades, and we have data on them, and they expect us to use that data to deliver solutions to them that are personalized, that recognize who they are. They don't want to have to repeat their story over and over again. I'm sure that you guys have heard similar stories like this in your businesses as well. So at this point, I need to take a brief interlude to get us all on the same page for what HIPAA is. So, I'm going to ask you all, so where are those people in the audience who know what HIPAA is and how it relates to digital analytics? Can I get a show of hands? Okay, you guys have permissions to get your phones out and check your email at this point while I get the rest of us on the same page. So, what's HIPAA? HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. And what that does is it regulates the disclosure of protected health information by covered entities. What are covered entities? They're things like healthcare clearinghouses, employer-sponsored health plans, health insurers, hospitals, medical service providers that engage in transactions for them. What's PHI? Protected health information. This is any information that's held by one of those types of organizations that can be linked to healthcare payment for an individual. And this is really interpreted rather broadly. It includes any part of an individual's medical record or payment history. And then finally, the business associate agreement. This is kind of the linchpin for this story. A business associate agreement What that does is it's an agreement between a company like mine in healthcare that produces healthcare data and vendors that receive that data on our behalf. It allows us to interact so that we can share that data, but it also creates responsibilities and penalties if a data breach were to occur. So this type of agreement needs to be signed on both halves to allow that exchange of data to happen. So what is PHI? Some of these are no-brainers. Names, social security number, healthcare record number, and the out-of-the-box tags and SDKs, these things aren't scooped up. So we're pretty good there. It gets a little bit more interesting with this next group. Geographic subdivision smaller than state. Yeah, that means zip code. And so we start to get closer to what an SDK and a tag will scoop up and pass over to a vendor. And then finally, this is where the rubber meets the road for us. Device identifiers, URLs, IP address. These are all HIPAA elements considered PHI. And so when you're using an out-of-the-box solution and you're passing those elements over to a vendor, you have to have a BAA in place. All right, HIPAA pros, I need you to come back. We're going to pick up the story now. So, I live in a world of round hole solutions, and I've got a square peg. So the issue faced by my organization was we needed to solve our consolidated view of our consumer digital activity. That view had to be at the individual user level so that we can combine it with other sources of data. That solution had to be sufficient for the enterprise. We had to be able to track people across our different properties so that we can blend it with our other sources of data to better understand our consumers. And it had to scale. Like I said, we are a company of 20 brands and we continue to expand that portfolio. So far, we're doing really good. This is the deal breaker for us. As we went out in the market evaluating solutions for web analytics, we found that no provider out there would be willing to sign that BAA. That's a hard stop for us because that means that we can't use their out-of-the-box solutions to send data to them, look at our data, and analyze it. So we were at a loss for what to do. And this is really the conundrum that we faced. So to get the most out of my data for my analysts and business partners to access our clickstream, we needed to provide that view of our consumers, what they were doing on our digital properties throughout our analytics solution. But because we had a vendor, our vendor wouldn't sign a BAA that would allow them to take PHI elements like IP address, I needed a solution that would allow me to strip that data out before sending it to my analytics solutions provider. And it wasn't enough that that data would land in their servers and then they would take it out. It couldn't go there at all. So it needed to be done on our side before it went to them. At the same time, I also needed to persist that entire clickstream. It needed to go back into our servers so that my analysts can blend that with other data like claims, contact history, purchase history, in order to create that robust view of our consumers, in order to drive that innovation and drive experience improvement for our consumers. We needed a solution that would provide both for us. And this is where Tealium Solutions came in. The gateway drug, Tealium IQ. So our initial engagement was with TIQ, and it really provides us that commonality across our sites so that we can understand how our consumers are moving within our ecosystem. It allows that common identifier. It also allows us the critical ability to control where we send our data, and it takes our dev resources out of the management of that. Event Stream, it's really been the crux of our solution because it allows us to take and flow that anonymized data over to our web analytics solution provider, and it allows us at the same time to persist that entire clickstream back into our data warehouses so that we can analyze that data. And last but not least, but critical, is the private cloud environment. This is where our instance of event stream lives. And Tealium knows that understanding HIPAA, they offer a private cloud environment, which allows us to keep our consumers' data walled off from other environments and secure. Tealium solution met our security and our privacy office's requirements for HIPAA, and allowing us to enter into a BAA agreement with them. This component of our solution allows us to send our entire clickstream with all the data that we need back into our servers, our data stores, so that we can blend that with the sources of data to drive that innovation. This is what our solution looks like today. We control our tags and our data from TIQ. We route our anonymized and our non-anonymized data into to their appropriate places, and we do that all through the private cloud. This solution allows for single site tracking as well as cross-domain journeys. So, this quote from Art Williams really describes both the journey that we went through as a company in this transition and my Ironman journey. So it was during the exact same time that we were planning and implementing our work, and I was training, competing for my Ironman. And I found this very metaphorical. So this guy in the green hat, that's me. This is moments before I enter the water. My race has started at this point. And just like us, I went through lots of training. I went through lots of preparation. And I knew what the journey was going to look like. And I knew that there was a finish line out there. I was good to go. And in the initial execution, we got started as an organization on implementing our web analytics solution. And it was going great. And at this point in the race, it was going great for me too. And then things stopped going great. I call this picture my sad Charlie Brown picture. You can almost hear the Charlie Brown music looking at this photo. And you know what? Things got hard at this point. And what you don't see in this slide, but is metaphorical for where we're at today with Tealium, is I had a partner come alongside me and help me get through those rough patches in my journey. Tealium came alongside us, offering up solutions time and time again. Well, we could look at it this way, or we could implement this. And so at the end, we got to a solution that was going to work. And when we did, we pulled up our big boy pants, just like I pulled up my big boy pants. And we started to get into the groove, and we started to head toward that finish line. And we got there. And today, in telling this story, we are at the finish line with our implementation of Tealium. And we're kind of doing a little bit of a celebration there. But, like at the end of any big endeavor, once you finish and you got the celebration going, you start to think about what's next. And we are starting to think about how we can use Tealium solutions to drive forward what else we need to do within our organization. So, more specifically about what we've got going on at Cambia. We've implemented TIQ on 11 of our wholly owned brands, and we are able to, we've enabled tracking on those brands that are most relevant to cross-domain tracking. Still better yet, I've decoupled what my analysts need to do in terms of their analytics from what product owners and developers need to do. I've enabled them from our web analytics solution. They can get their own data. They can see what the consumer is doing. It's not an ad hoc job anymore. And what this does is it allows my analysts to do the job that I hired them to do, to dive deep into our data, to provide insights, to help us understand how we can innovate and we can improve experience for our consumers. Our data exists in a HIPAA environment and fully in compliance with HIPAA laws. And finally, we control the flow of our data, not through our dev resources, but through our web analytics team. Shortly after we implemented our solution, We noticed that there are other instances of PHI in our data flow that we were unaware of. But because we were under a BAA with our previous web analytics solutions provider, we didn't know about their existence. Here's our health plan web page. It looks like a web page. And here's the thing that caused my problem. Search. We pass all of our search terms over to our web analytics solutions provider. Unbeknownst to us, we had consumers that were acting on their own, and they were searching by claim number. Claim number, that's a PHI element, right? And we were passing it over to our web analytics solution. We needed to stop that right away. Previously, what would have happened? The phone call. Hey, you got to stop our flow. You got to shut everything down. And then we'd have a developer go in and rip out that code before we could start that flow going back to our web analytics solutions provider. Now with Tealium solution, we discovered the problem, and within the hour, we'd shut that flow off just for that one variable. It literally was disaster averted. So, I'm wrapping up here, guys. So, a couple thoughts for those of you who are going to embark on that enterprise implementation like we did. Tolerance for risk. You really should understand what your organization's is. And I'd encourage you to understand not only what your organization's is, but your information security and your privacy office. Because the sooner that you can get them online, and the sooner you can understand where they're at, it's going to help you get to the right solutions for your organization and weed out those solutions that just won't work. You need to make them the department of yes. Yes, change is scary, especially when you're implementing across multiple areas of an organization. So what you need to do is you need to communicate. You need to include them in major decisions. You need to make your priorities their priorities. You need to make your timelines their timelines, because nothing's worse when you get a head nod up front and then you get feet dragging on the back and they're screwing with your timelines for your organization's implementation. The next one, you got to prove it to me, and this applies to the vendors that you're going to look at. Evaluate your partners really, really closely, because there are a lot of people out there who have a lot of things to sell. That doesn't mean that they're going to meet your deployment timelines. That doesn't mean that they're going to be there as you go through it to help your internal resources. You need to understand what your side responsibilities are. And then finally, just because they're talking about their solution doesn't mean that they've got it in production. We encountered a couple instances where we had people who were like, oh yeah, we got that. Yeah, we think it was back on some developer's bench. And when it came time to pull the trigger, they weren't there. And lastly, timing life is everything. You guys know this. You got to plan ahead. You got to make sure that as you're implementing, that you understand broadly what your organization's timelines are. And really, you want to make sure that you're not competing for resources, and you want to make sure that you can fly your data solution in place for a couple months along in parallel with your previous solution, so that you can really make sure that your data is solid before you begin the final cutover. So, in closing, where are we at right now? So we are leveraging our insights that we're getting in, and we continue to look for more ways that we can build those out to add value to our consumers, to drive innovation into our healthcare space, those areas that we impact. An example of that is we're starting to implement cross-domain tracking, not with our wholly owned properties, but with third-party partners as well, so that we can get even deeper insight into how our consumers interact with our brands. So, in closing, I'd like to thank you guys for attending today. I'd also like to thank our hosts at Tealium for inviting me to come and share this story. And I'd like to give a shout out to our Tealium solution partners, Phil Andrews, Dave Frank, Sean Browning, Trevor Silverthorne, Christina Sun. And last but not least, I want to thank my Cambia partners over there, Chris Coogan, Ivor Ban, and Kevin Higgins. They were so important to this solution, driving it forward, and we couldn't have done it without them. So, thank you. Cheers.